Hi everyone, welcome to Farsight News, the news show that tells you what is going to happen, not what did happen. I'm Trudy Brown, director of the Farsight Institute. Now I have a lot to tell you today. There have been huge changes in the world, and we at Farsight need to adapt to what is our and everyone else's new reality. To start with, you will notice that this show is titled Farsight News instead of Time Cross. The old Time Cross show is changing to match the new situation on the ground. People need to know what is happening in the world now, in advance of it happening, and the mainstream news and our political leaders are just not cutting it. So we're returning to the original mission of the Time Cross idea to forecast news events for the coming month. But now we are doing it differently. So we have renamed the show Farsight News, and I will explain it to you in just a moment. But first, let me announce the next major Farsight Mysteries project that will be released in just 2 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2 weeks we will release a huge project on the origin of the coronavirus pandemic. Now they say it started in Wuhan, China. Okay, but exactly where and how did it start? Well, we now think that we know the answer to this question. The results seem very clear, at least from a remote viewing perspective. You need to see it. And it will be released on farsightprime.com in 2 weeks. It is a really interesting project. All of the data were collected under totally blind conditions by some of the most highly skilled and experienced remote viewers on the planet, all with extensive track records while participating in large-scale public projects. 5 highly corroborating reports. May 15th, 2020, in just 2 weeks. This is a very detailed remote viewing investigation into the origin of the current health pandemic. We honestly cannot publish this anywhere else, and unless you are new to this planet, you know why. farsightprime.com, May 15th. Now, the current health pandemic is capturing all of the major news today. However, we can never be certain if any major crisis is simply what it looks like on the surface. Consider this. In my view, the single most fundamental long-term challenge facing humanity today is to recognize the reality of the extraterrestrials and to come to grips with the very turbulent influence extraterrestrials have had on the development of Earth civilizations from the super ancient past to the current time. Nothing is more important than that. Nothing. Until that happens, humanity is just playing the role of slave, prisoner, victim. You pick the word you want to use. No one is free on this planet until that happens. And in my view, no one can trust any political leadership until that happens. The possibility of manipulation within the context of all that secrecy is just too great. So, how can we help address that here at Farsight? Well, in addition to forecasting human news each month, we are also going to forecast what various extraterrestrials are doing each month as well. That is right, human news and ET news. All before it happens. The news doesn't get better than that. Both Farsight Human News and Farsight ET News are 2 separate shows. Farsight Human News is published on the 1st of every month on YouTube. You're watching it right now. But Farsight ET News is published on the 7th of every month, and it is published only on farsightprime.com, a week after the Human News. Now, the ETs are just not sitting around on their duffs. They are up to stuff, and we want to see what they are up to. We think you should know that too. Now, if they're watching us, let's turn the tables and watch them. Watch them. farsightprime.com, published on the 7th day of every month, starting in 1 week on May 7th. Now, there are more changes here at Farsight. Starting this month, we are beginning a monthly live intelligence briefing for our Farsight Prime subscribers using Zoom. Presidents of nations have intelligence briefings all the time, but I am not too impressed with what they do with that information. So we believe that you should have an intelligence briefing as well. The more people are better informed, the better. Also, this way we can interact with you live. You can ask questions and react. We will be sending email notifications to attend these meetings where people can ask questions about any Farsight-related topic. And I will give you my honest opinion regarding what is going on out there in the world and off the world. The first Zoom meeting will happen on May 8th, and I will be hosting the meeting. If you are a farsightprime.com subscriber, we will be sending you an email that has a link to join the meeting as we get closer to the May 8th date. In the subscribers-only meeting, I can talk about any subject relating to anything we do here at Farsight without the risk of running into censorship troubles. I can also comment on world issues, stuff I really cannot do here or elsewhere. Especially given the nature of our next major mysteries project, I think you can understand why this is so important. So, get ready to ask me questions on May 8th. We also plan to do YouTube live streaming starting later this month, as well to talk about more general ideas that don't run into the risk of censoring, and to allow audience interaction with some of our remote viewers. To be notified of when the YouTube live streaming events will occur, simply sign up for our free email newsletter on our website. The email newsletter is the only way you can hear about it in advance, so be sure to sign up for the newsletter at farsight.org. Now, there is more I have to tell you. We have privately made a huge effort and spent a ton of money over the past 2 years developing the theory and practice of using remote viewing for economic forecasting. Now, we have tried a lot of things that simply did not work, and we repeated them until we were clear about why they did not work. But we have also done things that did work, and we have learned a great deal about how to do them better. The road of real scientific research is never smooth. It is almost always bumpy. But in the end, there is understanding. So, as a result of our efforts, in the third week of every month, starting this month, we are going to publish on farsightprime.com a 2-month economic forecast based on remote viewing with respect to a particular topic. Our first forecast, coming out in just 3 weeks, will focus on oil prices over the next 2 months, from the June 1st starting point through the end of July. Again, each economic forecast will be for something different. This month, it is oil. The third week of every month, look for it, only on farsightprime.com. Now, many people have asked us over the past 2 years why we stopped publishing SICO forecasts, which are forecasts for cryptocurrencies that are just starting up, using things often called initial coin offerings. Well, we investigated a lot of startup currencies, and each investigation cost us a few $1,000s to do. And when all is said and done, we only found 2 startup currencies that we felt were good investments over a 5-year period, either in the sense that the investors would probably not lose their investments or that they had the potential to gain a fortune. So we published those 2 forecasts as SICO forecasts. But after investigating a great many other currencies, we decided that it was probably not a good use of our time and resources to continue investigating the long list of startup cryptocurrencies. There were just not enough survivors in the mix. What does that mean for us now? Well, we want to continue to use remote viewing to do 5-year forecasts for important economic entities that could have a major impact on our society. So we are expanding our research into other types of investments, in addition to cryptocurrencies. Starting this month, we will be publishing 5-year forecasts for a variety of economic entities, companies, cryptocurrencies, and commodities that investors might consider wise investments that could yield great returns. We are particularly interested in searching for investments that would be good places to preserve wealth in these troubled times, as well as having the potential to yield great returns in the future. These special forecasts will be sold separately, like our previous SICO forecasts, and we will announce them on our website, farsight.org, starting later this month, May 2020. Now, it is crucial that everyone realizes that no one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor. So anything that anyone at Farsight does that relates to using remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the selling prices of cryptocurrencies, stocks, commodities, or anything else, is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone doing investments are doing so at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees or warranties being made, either expressed or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and we at Farsight believe that after we do this for a while, it will be hard for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. This project is aimed at changing the world into a better place. Remote viewing is our tool to do this. This world wants proof that remote viewing is real. Nothing will do this better than a successful application aimed at predicting financial outcomes. So, to summarize, here is the timeline of the Farsight events that will happen this month, May 2020. Farsight Human News is released on YouTube on the 1st, and you are watching that now. Farsight ET News is released on May 7th. Then I will be hosting the live Farsight intelligence briefing on Zoom to the subscribers of FarsightPrime.com on May 8th. On May 15th, there is a major release of a new mysteries project, The Origin of the Coronavirus Pandemic, only on FarsightPrime.com. And on May 23rd, we have the release of the Farsight Economic Forecast on FarsightPrime.com. There will also be free live streaming events on YouTube during the month, and you need to be subscribed to our Farsight newsletter to be notified of that. So be sure to go to our website and sign up for our free newsletter where we will announce the YouTube live streaming events. Now, let's get on to the human news events for the month of May 2020. May will be an event-packed month. Here we utilize the talents of highly trained remote viewers to describe one or more future events that will happen in a given month. Let me explain what it means to predict a future event. Remote viewing is possible because of a generalization of quantum mechanics. Everything in the quantum realm of atoms and molecules is probabilistic. That means that we can predict the probability of something happening, but not the exact thing itself. Well, we are all made up of quantum things, so the same rules must apply to us as well. The science is complicated, and we don't need to go into detail here, but it is important that I explain that because of this generalization of quantum mechanics, it means that we live in a universe of multiple timelines. There is no single timeline for the past, present, or future. So, when someone uses remote viewing to predict the future, the person is perceiving one timeline out of a multiplicity of timelines. Very often, a good remote viewer will get it right exactly, but other times there will be significant differences between the remote viewing perceptions and what one experiences in real life. Even if the remote viewing is done perfectly, this can happen in the context of multiple timelines. So, how can we use this to our advantage in predicting the future? Easy. Here is how we do it. If we want to know what the future is going to be like, we need a sample of perceptions of that future so that we can look at a collection of future timelines. From that sample, we get a general idea of what the future will hold for us. Sometimes we will experience exactly what the remote viewing perceptions forecast says we will experience, but other times there will be differences. But on average, the general nature of the remote viewing perceptions for the sample will closely follow what we actually experience. So, in a sense, we are taking a statistical survey of the future and using that to determine the general nature of our future that we are marching into. Cool, right? 6 remote viewers participated in this month's project: Aziz Brown, PrinCess Jeaneé, Melena Hall, Trudy Benjamin, Kahmia Dunson, and Arkie. So, we have 6 reports of 6 events. Now, one of the conditions relating to the targeting for this month's news project is that the events should be ones that are being watched by or told to President Donald Trump. That is, we want to know what events that President Trump is being told about so that we can figure out what may be driving his thinking process during the month. So, let's begin, starting with 2 remote viewing sessions done by Melena Hall and PrinCess Jeaneé. Both of these viewers perceive a violent event in an urban area. A building is seriously damaged. There is a confrontation between police and subjects who appear weak or even disabled in some way.
Seeing flat land. Picking up surface structures. Feel the warm temperature here. A lot of man-made smells, also larger structures in this area. I hear a lot of sounds, movement below. Lots of movement by subjects. There's seems to be a busy area around the surface. I'm hearing subjects outside. Somewhere in the center, there's just a wide, spacious area. And it's around large buildings, but I'm getting this large surface area. So I'm seeing this large, flat land. There's this big structure building, like in the far back, but it's noticeable. There's still structures around this area, but this area is like a large, flat, man-made surface. Above this structure, I'm seeing like a glass ceiling or something that's clear. It's a man-made structure. Feels like a large building, like large but not like tower or skyscraper, just wide with this glass top and metallic things around it. Outside the structure, I'm seeing subjects in a uniform. I'm seeing white vehicles as well, but around I'm seeing subjects in uniform. These subjects look like they're captured or they look like they're being trained, kind of protected. They don't look as strong as the subjects from a distance or the ones that take them to this building, but these subjects looks like they need some type of strength. They look kind of fragile. Subjects looks like female, male, but I see a lot of female. I hear a lot of loud voices, like harsh talking, a lot of commands going around. This whole line and area feels strict. They look like inmates almost, but they don't seem like trouble people. It seems like they're just trying to help them. Moving to the center of this area, this building. I'm getting like a rectangular and also curved shape on each of the top angles of the structure. And again, I'm seeing this glass clear shine as well. The structure looks a bit like a cement tan color, off-white. I'm getting a bronze color too. The structures around are gray. This area feels like a city, but this structure here looks very different from the rest. Still has a simple man-made building look, but a bit different, and seems like a lot of value holds in this structure. I hear a lot of noises outside, like a lot of noises, like voices, loud talking, sirens. It's a nauseous sound that's around this area. a smell of smoke and burning. I'm getting a loud explosive noise. This air is very hot. Again, I seen smoke coming from the structure. A burst of fire flames. So here I see like a big explosion on this structure. There's subjects coming from outside of this structure. There's a lot of like cars surrounded this area. There's subjects in business attire standing from afar, while the subjects that are outside the structure doesn't look well. They look pretty sick. There's a subject here that feels very important, and let's look into that subject. He seems to be involved with this. This subject seems to be in danger, and he sees danger, but he can't do anything about it, and he's not trying to risk it. This subject, I'm getting a older subject. Male subject has an old face, but seems like he's trying to take care of his skin. Has like a darker tone skin, but he's not like dark. He's like a tannish, he's tan, but he has like brighter tones around his face. Like he has small eyes, doesn't smile as much, but here I'm getting this very heavy guy. He seems to be in charge, have a goldish light hair color. He seems concerned, but he's not motivated to just physically take action. He has people for that. He's talking loud, like on a speaker. He seems out of place when he talks, but he's just trying to get things back in order. He feels very overwhelmed. He's been in a lot of situations, but this one is just in his face, like he's sitting here just looking. I could feel his sweat. It's very greasy, like. But yeah, so he's trying to get things in order. This subject is, he's kind of afraid as well. I feel that he's in fear right now because he's seeing subjects, and it's so many subjects. It's like a group they're standing from a long distance, and there's lots of gas smells out here, and there's so much that people are trying to fix at the same time. It's a lot of chaos. So I see a group of subjects, not too many. The guys are wearing the same clothes. Some have on full clothes, some have less clothing. Subjects look like they need help. They are sick. Looks contagious. These subjects are in bad condition. Some of these subjects are sitting on the ground, some are standing up. They're crying for help. It's like they asking for attention, but it's like there wasn't getting any attention. I feel like they just need to just follow orders. These subjects are extremely upset. A lot of subjects around them are guarded and in like dark uniform. Seems like they're ready to attack, but they're not going to kill them. But I hear a lot of threatening going on. And some are disabled. It's like these subjects are bad, and the structure outside is destroyed. There's a lot of action going around. A lot of people are just watching, and everything around is toxic. All these subjects here are thinking to do something extreme. I have a feeling that they're ready to attack, but they're way too weak to really just move and fight. So the main subject seems like he's going to get things in order. I can feel death here. It's a lot of smoke, and I see water. Just smell of fear, and I feel bad for these subjects.
Eight, 6, 8, 4, 7, 2, 7, 7. My basic gestalts here are land and structures. I have a base surface with a level topography, very large structures, white, made of stone. I have a structure here, white, made of stone, very tall steps, monumental vertical lines in front. They look like columns or pillars. It's very wide in stature, and then they have these what look like columns or pillars in open space. There are multiple structures here. This is a very, very large city. The structures, the subjects here, multiple subjects, foliage, grass, water nearby. I hear it, I smell it. Both man-made and natural elements. Very open land nearby. Moving into the center of the target, the land and structures remind me of a theme park. Structures or things that people want to see. Here, large structures are things that people want to see or come to see. Large, long, and wide structures. There's little to no movement here, but the energy is very, very high. There's a lot of high energy. I don't see a lot of people. I don't see a lot of movement at this moment. I'm seeing, it feels as though I'm seeing two different things or elements, like I'm in two places at once. Something looks chaotic, movement like a crowd, but the crowd is scattered, not close together, very emotional. And the second element is almost in a deserted state. Little to no movement, very few subjects, null emotion or dry emotions. It looks like an apocalypse. It puts me in the memory of an apocalypse or something, also something like a riot. I guess these are both of my places. Movement is fast in and out. Maybe looting, possible looting, protesting, or emergency of some sort. Some type of loud sound, a rumble or a boom, a loud, aggressive sound. Things are not together here. Subjects are scattered, and it looks like something broke in society. It looks just like broken society. It looks like something broke within the society, just mayhem everywhere. I also see a dark colored box. There's a primary subject here. Seems to be an older male, very tall, looks mean in the face, wrinkled skin to some extent. Very business professional, blue or black suit or tie, very full of himself, big, macho man. He looks like he's yelling. His face is red. I don't like his mindset. He's just very, very aggressive. He seems very fake, acts like he cares, but he doesn't. And he talks. He points his fingers. He looks. He demands. He's very manipulative in manipulating the political mindset. He's got a bad attitude, large. I see a large structure with columns. I don't know if he's inside or outside of the structure, but I don't like this guy. He's just, he's got issues in his mind. The original cause of this target puts me in a different location. I have a structure. I see clean workstations. Looks like a doctor's office maybe, or but it also looks abandoned. A lot of this looks very abandoned. Inside a structure, I see a desk, white floors, very clean. Electric or sliding doors, very monotoned, one color, bright light. It's large, tall, wide. This feels like a very important place. And outside, there's a lot of open space and foliage here.
Next up, Kahmia Dunson reports on what appears to be a pandemic-related event or situation. A report like this is useful to see since it tells us how the pandemic is developing this month.
I have pretty level topography here. There are subjects here, there are structures here, and I hear rumbling noises, like a static radio kind of noise, like a static TV kind of noise. There's man-made sounds here, like a very dry, chalky, man-made surface on the base surface. So it's definitely like a man-made land here. It's an overall, urban environment and just activity by these subjects, and there's activity by objects as well. Okay, so basically, just like a flat surface here, kind of just like laying in the backdrop. There's like like a dark kind of man-made ground, and I see something that looks like a mosque or like a very complex structure, like a Capitol building. You know what I mean? It's very big, regal, like these like real like round tops. Yeah, I see multiple like dome-like structures, and I see like water in the background as well. There's like distant water. Okay, there are multiple subjects here, many subjects here. I hear ringing in the ears, but it still feels like very quiet and still. There's like a circle of subjects, and it smells like very clean in here. And it kind of reminds me of a hospital. It is still very quiet, and there's man-made noises, man-made sounds. But it feels like there's like a focused gathering of subjects here in this structure. Okay, honestly, the energy is so different. It feels very like sad here and depressive. Energy around here. It feels like these subjects have on like this thin but like sturdy clothing. And there's some sort of like lurking, like heavy presence. You know what I mean? There's many, many random objects in here as well. Like if you're just in like someone's like, basically if you're just in like any sort of public or private area, like you just don't go in someone's home and they have like a couch, they got a couch and a table and stuff like that. So there's like a lot of things inside here. There's a lot of tables, a lot of little tiny looking like tools or like just small objects on these larger objects, and it feels like I'm just in a room with like full of crap or full of things. Okay, instantly I feel like the subject is in pain. Like I have this like cramp almost. It feels like the stomach, my subject's stomach is in pain. And the pain feels like, right here in this area. So there's like pain in the stomach, there's pain in their chest. And it almost makes me want to like cough, like it's like that pain you get when you want to cough. So like this person has like pneumonia. Okay, this subject feels like they're wearing very, very thin clothes. Like for the most part, but then they also feel like exposed a little bit, like they're like a little naked, but covered up at the same time, like if you're wearing a robe. Yeah, so like inside this room, again, I smell like that weird smells sterile, kind of like a dentist's office, like a hospital. Like I swear I'm in a hospital, but it smells like something like that, like sterile and clean. And my subject looks like he has like darker skin. Feels like very stagnant, very still, like time is standing still. There's this very like sad, helpless energy in the area. Yeah, it's just really doesn't feel like anything's happening. It just feels like there's a lot of sad, depressive, sick energy here. Kind of like if you were to walk into like a morgue, And these rooms seem to have like this like fabric-y like wall kind of. So these rooms like are covered in fabric. And overall, this place just makes me feel like physically gross myself. Just to give you like an idea, I guess. It's like when I mean like rooms covered in fabric, it's kind of like if you were to like a giant shower curtain, okay? It's like giant shower curtains around rooms. Yeah, and my subject is just kind of in there. He feels sick and sad, and there's just a lot of sick and sad people inside this place.
Next up, Rock Arkie reports on what appears to be a very complex and interesting military confrontation. If the world didn't have enough to worry about right now, this is added to the mix. We are presenting Rock's session in an interview format. All right, so Rock, this is great. You have a remote viewing session here, and this is the method that you used. Actually, this is Dick Algar's method that he was the one who taught you this. So this is mostly of that style of remote viewing. So this is a session where you were describing a news event that will occur in May of 2020, and you did this session in April 2020. So tell me let's go through your pages and just tell me the impressions that you got here. Well, how did the session start out?
Well, the session initially started out with a visual of all I can describe as a very large container ship. And what I saw was a large ship on the ocean, but it was laden with containers. You know how the container ships are just stacked with containers. And I got a really clear visual of this ship sort of traveling toward me. And then we freeze frame to the next glimpse I got, and that it seemed to be two gentlemen in a control room. The control room was heavily laden with displays, like displays that were wrapping around. And there was a person seated and a person standing next to them, and they were obviously engaged in viewing what was on the screens. And as I progressed through this target, the next impression, the next sight I got was very interesting. There was a large topological scenery. I could see the bending coastline. I could see a large coastline. And then what was apparent against that coastline was this iconic structure. And sometimes you get AOL'd when you're viewing a target, and I kept on thinking, wow, this looks like as reminiscent of the Seattle Space Needle. And as I described that, a landmass near water with a curving coastline, and then this large object. Now, that's a guess, and we don't guess in remote viewing, so I really have no idea. But as far as what the object looked like, it was very tall with a saucer shape on its top.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's actually a few structures around the world that have that shape. I was actually thinking it looked a little bit sort of a control tower-ish.
Or control tower, like an airport control tower. Something of that. When you see the view here, you'll get your own.
Yeah.
Get your own idea. I'm sorry. On page 5 of S4, I'm getting a visual of, first of all, a large structure, a heavy structure, and that's the way I frame them when I sense and see something that's very substantial. So a heavy structure, something like a government building or a bank or an established old structure, but what I'm getting is significant. I see traffic, vehicular traffic. Some of it seems military. I see flashing lights, and in the distance, I see smoke and some level of destruction. Not around that particular heavy structure. It has its own level of destruction. There's smoke coming from that structure, but there's other intermittent areas where there seems some bit of distress in what would be considered an urban setting, with a long line of vehicles, and I say heavy vehicles, seems like military vehicles. I got a sense of urgency. It was mild temperatures. There like I said, other areas that had the debris or the sense of destruction. It wasn't widespread, it was sporadic, but it was sort of laced in the fabric of an urban area where there's pockets of problems.
That building looks almost like a Capitol building with a dome in the center.
I did pick up the dome, right? I did pick up the dome, and
the audience should know that does not mean it's a Capitol building. It
correct.
Just looks like that. And in the SRV stuff, we call it a deduction. Other people sometimes call it an analytic overlay or an AOL, but it does look like that type of a thing. And having those military vehicles near such a governmental type of structure would sort of make sense.
It does. The next sense I picked up was simply, it was almost cartoonish. I felt this pop, boom, and then a bang, and it was like there was a concussion, and then there was a resonant concussion, like a pop, and then boom. So it had almost sounded to me like like the loading of a missile, the launching of a missile.
Hmm.
I've heard the launching of missiles, and you get that that loading thud, and then the concussion as it takes off. But then there's a boom concussion when it hits a target.
Did it sound more like the takeoff, or did it sound more like because a pop or a boom, that could be an explosion of some type, the result of something. So
A pop and a bang. So there were two distinct impressions that I got. One, the bang was the concussive. The pop was maybe a release.
I see. So two sounds that had, it's two punctuating sounds. The pop happening first, the bang happening second. But the audience should understand that that doesn't mean a rocket did it. You're just saying that that's the type of thing that could do something like that. But it does sound to me as if there was sounds like you have a delay between the pop and the bang. How long was the delay, you think?
1,000, 1,000, 1,000, about a 3-second delay between the distinctive pop and the bang. And that's why my depiction is sort of almost comic-like, because I was like taken back by the separation and the distinctive sounds.
Yeah, so we don't know what causes the pop and the bang, but it still fits in with the other stuff that you were having, which is the big structure with dome on top that had some destruction associated with it. So something seems to be some type of
Activity, something kinetic.
Yeah, some type of activity, some type of protest, disruption, some type of some type of fighting activity of some sort seems to be
Now
going.
we can fast forward to much smaller building. It's not the heavy structure that we had seen before, but sort of like a medium size, lighter built structure. But there was a facade.
You're talking page 7 of S4, is that right?
Page 7, S4, correct.
Yeah, tell me what that said. That looks like, what's that about?
So this is about, like I said, a much smaller footprint and a tremendous amount of glass in the front, or the facade, with victims or humans, live humans inside, and some seem in various levels of distress. But what I picked up was all the shattered glass, the smoke, the post-destructive impact. Just sort of a mess inside. It wasn't horrific. I didn't get that sense, but I got a sense of tremendous destruction, not structural so much, but broken glass everywhere.
That sort of reminds me of what inner cities look like, storefronts look like after a riot. They have, the people break the glass, there's looting. That's what it looks sort of like after all that happens. I'm not saying that that's what is occurring here. That just this building with the broken glass in front of it. It could also be that the broken glass is a result of the concussion blast that you heard earlier.
If the concussion was the same concussion, right? So.
Yeah, if it was the same.
The real difference in sensation and visual was the size of the structure. And the fact that, you get that impression that there's been destruction, that there's glass. It has a different sense, a different feel. And through this particular format of remote viewing, you get those visual sensations.
So clearly we're seeing in your session physical disruption, some type of protest, military response, some type of explosive events. Well, let's go on to page 8 of your S4. Who's that? What's going on there?
So I reached out and was looking for life humans, a central figure, and this is what popped up with the central figure. And there's nothing negative or positive. It's really just a visual. I didn't really do a whole lot of probing on the individual. Because I was surprised as I drew the picture. I say, okay, I've got a man in middle age, short cropped hair, almost gaunt, very thin, and serious, a public figure.
Hmm.
But I got the sense that this figure is central to some theme.
Hmm.
And that was about all. Like I said, I didn't. We can take time. We can go probing
Yeah.
into the individual.
But
I didn't pick that up at the time. I was like taken aback by just the visual.
I do see that the guy has a jacket and tie on, so that gives us a little bit of indication of him. It's not like someone with a T-shirt or something like that.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, let's move on to your page 9. That's an interesting thing on S4.
I got the tremendous sense, the feeling of a submarine, an underwater craft, but it was like making speed. It was, and the impression I got, and that's something we work for. The impression I got was simply that it was post-action. It was departing. It was leaving. It was not on its way. It was on its way out of the way.
Oh, so you got the feeling that it was leaving wherever it was.
Correct.
That's interesting.
Fast.
As fast as it could. So you didn't get the idea that it was a missile or a torpedo or anything. You got the feeling that it was like a submarine that was bigger. Is that type of a thing? Is that right?
It was a big submarine. Right. Right.
Interesting.
And you know that the viewpoint from the figure, you sort of get a distinctive flair for what you're sensing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's now move on to this really weird thing you have on page 10.
Yeah, this was disturbing. You know, I mean, and in remote viewing, I tend to maybe avoid some nasty scenes, you know, and it's just because we get real wrapped up in the scene itself, and we get those sensations, feelings, and sometimes they're not too pleasant. And I got to tell you, this one I went over and over. I got the first impression, and my first impression, I was trying to sense. I sensed body parts. I sensed blood. Didn't sense life. I sensed a mess. But I couldn't tell at first if it was if these components, human components, were on the earth or in the water. And I went back and forth on this, trying to get that soft, mushy, wet sensation. And I ended up, my mental compromise was to say there's land potentially nearby, but I believe these bodies are in a mess. And when I say a mess, blood, oil, water, pieces. There was a lot of, they were the artifact of some tremendous destruction.
That fits in with the submarine idea leaving. All throughout this session, we're seeming this is a event that involves considerable amount of violence. And what happens when you get to page 11, S4?
Yeah, I got a sense of a medium-sized fast mover, a boat that, and when I got the visual, it was getting nailed. Bam! That was the the explosion, the report.
So it was being hit.
Midships, right?
Interesting. Okay, so there's a naval element to this thing. Okay, what about S4, page 12?
Now we've been and that's what made this session so challenging, because we've been so inundated with all the noise that's out there about all the pandemic, the president, you know, the military, the CDC. So it's tough to get into a place where that noise is ceased. However, I was in a real good place, and I just picked up what we've seen so many times, and that was, I saw helicopters in the air, and I got a visual of a helicopter taking off from the ground. And my sense is that this is more official than less official, because I've seen that same movement of 2 or 3 helicopters when the president moves.
Yeah, you wrote here like presidential, VIP.
VIP, yep.
So some type of helicopter movement. Okay, so yeah, now we should say that this does not mean we're expecting this to happen in the United States, but whatever this event is, it seems to have high level stuff going on. So what happens with your final page, page 13? It's color, which is really interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I feel inspired to do color when I get that highlighted visual or energetic signals, and you just feel compelled to put color in our palette. Normally we don't,
So what's
but
going
this
on
one,
here?
say again?
So what's going on here? This looks like a space thing.
So, so when I was into this and I was doing my probe, I got that expansive sense. I saw the atmosphere. I saw the curvature of the Earth. But what was really interesting is I'm looking down on what appeared to be a satellite within my view, but it was much farther down. It's smaller. And then I saw one that was closer to me. And those satellites were near some other object that was unlike a satellite.
Yeah.
Unlike a satellite in its shape, form, and but similar to a satellite maybe in its mission. So I got a sense that the satellites had been flown to this location to monitor this other device, this other craft, and that the craft has a very, very unique shape and a very unique energy emission that they're monitoring, and then of course reporting back. And it was a very interesting visual, right? I mean, I could sense the.
It's unusual. It doesn't really look like a modern day spacecraft that we sent up recently. So it makes me wonder. I wish you'd had a chance to go into the spacecraft to find out who's in it, if there's anyone in it at all.
Yeah, I did probe, and my initial probe led me to a gateway or doorway. In other words, it was a gateway or doorway, and to what significance, I don't know. I didn't try to think it or overthink it, but even the almost archway is inviting. It's an entry point to somewhere else.
Well, okay.
That sounds.
We don't know how these things fit together, but I assume we will find out in May how they fit together, and it's going to be
Right.
interesting. What's interesting with this session is that if something like this does happen in May, we may see a lot of separate parts and not know how to connect them. And this session tells us to connect them. And so if this type of a thing does happen, it will really help us in interpreting such an event. So that's really great. Next up, Trudy Benjamin reports on what appears to be an underground or underwater event that may be related to a mine accident or situation.
Basic gestalt for this target is structures and subjects. There are structures, multiple, and subjects inside of structures. There's multiple subjects in this environment. There's a flat base surface, there's upward movement, also sensing forward movement as well. There's the concept of falling down or something dropping, downward movement, sensing worry or painful emotions. I'm also noticing an English language within all of the subjects. There's a lot of chatter and sounds of racket, like lots of loud sounds. And lots of these subjects are brown skinned or toned, like they have dark skin tones or they're very tan. There's lots of forward movement. Forward and downward movement. Like something's going forward, up, and then down. I'm noticing there's a very level topography. The base surface is very flat. I also noticed that there's a moving structure. This movement is forward. There's a large rectangular structure on the base surface with subjects on the inside of this structure. The subject on the inside of this structure is inside of the structure for business. I'm sensing subjects multiple subjects on the inside, just nearby. I'm sensing a subject on the inside of the structure, but they're searching for something. I'm not sure like what specifically, but there's a subject that is really trying to find something, or they're searching for something, or there's something that needs to be found somewhere. The subject is moving. There's lots of movement inside of this structure. This structure is underground. This structure is underground, but there's lots of movement underground. I'm sensing lots of pathways, and the sound is so loud. It's like pressure. Like I'm feeling movement forward from subjects and structures, but it's still down below, underneath the base surface of land. It's either underground or underwater. There's multiple subjects inside of structures, underground or underwater. Inside of these structures are other objects nearby. I'm sensing lots of objects. There's multiple forms of movement, like forward and upward. And this loud racket sound. I'm going to move to the initial moment of this target event. From the initial moment of this target event, I'm sensing shouting, screaming, pain, fire, something about help, something needing help. I'm noticing a sense of like a mine, or I'm gonna deduct that. I'm deducting mine. I'm sensing something underground, lots of racket sounds, lots of fast movement. There's also a shout and a scream sound that is echoing in my head. I'm sensing a lot of fear and screaming and rumbling sounds and booming sounds, and inside of this structure, there's just a lot of loud sounds, underground or underwater. There's multiple structures inside of this one structure. There's lots of objects around as well, multiple subjects and scared emotions. I'm also sensing worry and fear, like something needs to be found, something needs to be seen, or something needs to be found. Sensing someone or a subject focusing on something and caring about something very delicately or carefully. And I'm also noticing that there's a structure above on land. I'm going to move to the target event. Moving to the target event, I'm noticing lots of movement. I'm sensing falling, something stressful. There's lots of chaos. There's a course. There's action. There's lots of movement, like a course of action is being played out. I'm also feeling like something is being built or destroyed, like there's something being built or something being broken apart or disassembled or destroyed or disheveled, something crashing and falling apart. I'm sensing mining a lot. That is a major deduction in this. I'm noticing subjects inside of a structure. These structures are filled with loud sounds like screaming and shouting and echoes, but I'm also sensing booming and rumbling and tumbling sounds like machines. I'm Noticing a lot of movement continuously. Fast movement. The environment is natural. There's land. There's structures on land or underground. There's lots of sounds. I'm hearing a thumping. That's like I don't know how to explain it besides boom. I'm also hearing talking and screaming and shouting. The emotions from these subjects are filled with fear or worry about something not being found, or something that needs to be found, or something that's been destroyed or created and then destroyed. There's subjects inside of this structure that are really in need of help. Like, why do they need help? Money. I'm sensing money is the need, or they need money, or they need some help because they're in a poor state, or they're poor, or they're something about being poor. Poor feelings. There's something negative about security. Something needs to be helped. The environment is very natural, but also harsh. There's a harsh environment. I'm sensing movement from subjects and objects. There's also, these objects are very rectangular and big and heavy. I'm noticing the movement coming from multiple subjects and structures underground, from heavy objects as well. And this movement is upward and forward, upward and forward. I'm also noticing this environment very harsh and a natural land environment.
Finally, Aziz reports on what appears to be a domestic violence event that spills out onto the street. Now, you may wonder why such a report is important to us. Well, the current lockdown situation is causing a huge upsurge in domestic violence incidents. People are stuck in the same house or apartment for weeks on end, and the pressure is building. This report is important because it brings into focus this very real mental health aspect of our current crisis.
Hi, we are now going to look at target 00623602. All right, so I'm getting a lot of structures, multiple structures, all sort of lower level, lower elevation structures, and I'll just sketch it all out. So. All right, so there's some natural hills that are way off in the distance, but otherwise it just seems to be this expanse of lower level, almost like a suburb or something like that, lower level structures, man-made structures, and there seems to be very few subjects around, but it seems like there are subjects inside. Like there's a subject inside of a structure that is pretty noticeable here, a subject outside of a structure over here, and then otherwise there's one subject that's in the middle of the street or road. All of this seems like a very man-made environment. But one subject out here, and it's holding an object like this, and this subject seems like it's quite erratic. It's sort of moving that object up and down, erratic sort of motions. Let's touch the object. Yeah, the object is metallic, sharp, a sharp metallic object. Okay, so really zooming out here, I mean, it seems like here's those hills that are just further back in that way, and everywhere else is just this expanse. It seems like kind of an arid environment, a little bit dry, but it's just this big expanse of lower level structures, not these big skyscraper type things, but a lot of these lower level structures, lower level, semi-wide, almost like these structures kind of look the same, and it almost has like a grid pattern if you're looking at it top down of the structure layout. All right, so I can't really tell what's directly underneath this subject. As you can tell, the subject is really stressed out, but I can't really tell what's exactly underneath the subject right here, but it does have sort of a wetness to it, sort of like a wetness, it just feels wet, but it's also still hardish, and there's some soft areas as well, but it feels kind of soft in some areas, kind of wet. Can't really clearly make what's going on here, but we'll have to do some more investigating in a bit. But yeah, we'll do a deep mind probe. Really heated, really angry, but not in a controlled way, like really erratic, kind of crazy feeling, just really stressed out, uncontrolled. A huge amalgam of high intensity, unrestricted emotions that are just completely out of control. Feels really out of control, untethered, and a lot of erratic movements, physical movements, and a lot of erratic thoughts, mental thoughts. So there's a vehicle. The vehicle sort of seems to be turning around over here. This is the first vehicle I'm noticing in this immediate area. And not shortly after, it seems like there is more subjects around this subject. So I'm gonna have to do another sketch for that. Just hold on. I think they all just shoot him. And so these multiple subjects over here sort of are surrounding the very stressed out, very erratic subject, and this one is the first one to make the decision to make this really loud popping sound, because the sensations I'm getting immediately were just this really loud popping sound. And this, when I was looking at the origin of the sound, it seemed like it was this machine sort of thing this guy's holding, and he sort of makes the sound, and this person, they're sort of like this, and then back here, sort of like in the back, like upper torso area, I feel like this sort of, like something punctures them, like penetrates them, and then these guys do the exact same thing, and they just sort of let loose, and this person just falls right to the ground. And I'll draw a picture of that, I guess. All right, I don't have the color red right now, but we'll use pink. There's a lot of liquidiness around them, and it looks like a reddish color, so I'm guessing it's like blood. And so this is then, and right after all the pops, turns into that. And feels pretty dead. Feels pretty dead. So let's go into deep mind probes of what's going on right here. So then we'll try to backtrack and then see how this all happened. So deep mind probes. All right, so these guys all seem like, from this guy's perspective, they all seem like they have a uniform on, sort of this navy or darkish, like maybe blackish color uniform. And they're very tough appearance, very stern. Mentally, this guy, we'll just call him S1, the first guy who pulls the trigger, shoots this person. He has this really intense, very focused energy, and is very, very intensely focused on S2, very intensely focused on being aggressive, but not in an uncontrolled way. It's like really, really aggressive, like a spear, and just all of that is just directed in this really high adrenaline, high intensity situation with S2. And it's like S2 makes a movement, and it's like a slight movement, like just the tiniest movement, and S1 decides like, shoot, and he just boom, and he shoots, and he's just, the entire time though, S1 is just very, like this guy. He's light-skinned dude, he's got kind of a belly, and yeah, he just seems like he's got a lot of, I don't want to call it anger, but it's like, it's just too precise for me to just feel okay just calling it anger. It's like really, really like threaded, like threading a needle with anger type of stuff. Completely focused in and directed all on one point, being S2. And it's a little hard to describe this type of emotion, but it's just very high adrenaline, very high intensity. And very ferocious at the same time, but not in an uncontrolled type of way. Just very much directed towards like taking S2 down. And S2, anyway, S2 dies. At least I think S2 dies. It's just mentally and emotionally, everything becomes very cold and very silent for S2 from during this transition period from not being full of bullets to being full of bullets. If they're bullets, but it's feels like they're bullets, so I guess I'm just calling it that. But anyway, so yeah, S2 is sort of still angry, but it's more frustration at this point. Like right here, it feels like S2 is not able to get what S2 wants to say out, or is not able to communicate, or not able to do something, and he feels really frustrated. Just really, really, really frustrated. And so he just, he makes this movement, and then from the back just gets hit with this thing, and then from all sides just gets hit, and then just falls to the ground, and his mind just starts to go cold. It's a weird feeling. It's like just a warmth of emotions just fade to silence. And then that's pretty much it. Anyway, let's go back in time and see what was the original cause, what was the event that catalyzed this whole situation to unfortunately happen in the middle of the street. So, back in time. All right, so excuse the bad drawing, but this is what's going on inside of a structure. So inside of a structure in a different area, you got the still alive S2, and we'll call this, so this is S2, the person who died in the street, possibly died, and this is S3, this will be a new person, and feels like this is a guy, a male, female, and yeah, so it seems like there's a little communication going on, and there's erratic movement. There's a very erratic movement by this S2 to pick up this sharp metallic object that he carries with him until the end of his days. But he makes some really erratic motions, so I'm just going to double check what those are. All right, so it's like he grabs this object and he goes towards S3. And at first I felt like he was just sort of like making a threatening motion, but he makes the full downwards motion, and it obviously hits S3. It hits S3 in some way. And then it's like he keeps this like close to himself as well. And then I feel wetness. So I don't know if it's like he cuts S3 and gets blood from S3 onto him, or if he like slices right through and then he like accidentally like stabs himself or something like that, or maybe he just stabs himself afterwards or something like that. Anyway, he makes these motions, holds this thing really close to himself, and then just runs out the door. And then he just runs out the door and then eventually gets shot. That's what happened. It's just he makes that motion, holds this close, runs outside. And let's do some deep mind probes and get a sense of what the feelings are, what the emotions are. All right, yeah, this is pretty bad. So this subject sort of gets on top of this subject, and the emotions going on is like, this is just a steady escalation into like insane rage. So it's like this subject just gets really angry, more angry, and completely loses control, grabs this object, makes a lunge for this other subject, starts making these erratic motions, and I couldn't really tell until I started to try to perceive the feelings of this subject. This subject just sort of goes from also sort of having this like angerish frustration to having this like coldness and fear. It's like a very big temperature shift in the emotions. And to the cold, when it gets to the coldness and the fear, and it gets even more cold, is when this subject's on top of this subject, making the erratic motions, and I feel sort of like the stomach getting like opened or cut or something like that. It's not good at all. Really weird to feel or watch. And then this subject sort of, gets up and is sort of like this, like sort of and I don't know if this is like just holding this like metal object close to them, or if they've like cut themselves as well or something like that. But it's like, then the subject just leaves, just runs outside, and it's wet. There's a wet feeling on this subject. So I'm guessing the subject has blood on him elsewhere. This subject is, just on the ground, just no longer really a part of the target that much anymore. I mean, just sort of, but I just feel this like hot to cold sensation. This subject, after is attacked by this subject, goes from like a frustration, hot energy, high energy, to fear, cold, on the ground, cold. This subject runs outside, goes outside, starts doing all this erratic stuff, and then sometime later is surrounded by 3 subjects who all just make these popping sounds. This subject then falls to the ground, and then their frustration, their heat mentally just goes cold, and all around super sad, all around super bad. Type of day, type of target. Not cool.
Okay, so let's draw some conclusions from these data. 2 of the reports by Melena Hall and PrinCess Jeaneé both have a significant urban disturbance. This suggests that the social effects of the current pandemic and the lockdown are starting to be expressed with increasing levels of energy. Also, the continuing health issue itself seems to be portrayed clearly by Kahmia Dunson's session. Finally, the session by Aziz Brown suggests that the mental health elements relating to the pandemic and the lockdown are creating havoc with many relationships. All 4 of these sessions seem to indicate a continuing or escalating situation with regard to the current pandemic in the month of May. However, the sessions by Arkie and Trudy Benjamin indicate that there will be other issues or events of great significance that will hit in May. So, the pandemic is not the only thing that will draw our attention or the attention of President Donald Trump. Remember that the underlying cue for this month's edition of Farsight's Human News is that the news events should be among those in which President Donald Trump has been following in some manner. We are not concerned whether the events are covered as major events in the mass news media. The hyper-sensationalizing mass news media is simply not very good at covering the news, so we cover the stories and events that our viewers are drawn to. These events seem sufficiently important that we should be able to verify whether or not they actually happen by the end of the month rather easily. So let's wait and see. The news before it happens. Now, let's briefly review our forecast for April 2020 last month. Last month's news forecast was one of tumult and protests, heated political discussions, and little or no resolution to the political aspects of the current pandemic. At the time of making the forecast, there was no indication that the current lockdown situation would or even could result in major protests. Everyone was supposed to be either in their houses or apartments, but not out on the streets protesting in large groups. But in fact, continuing protests were one of the major news stories of the month in April. Many wanted the lockdown to end, and there was serious pressure on many governors in the United States to end the lockdown, at least partially, so that the economy could restart. In March, I would not have thought that that would be possible for April, but that was the forecast, and that is indeed what happened. This remote viewing forecasting business is very interesting and surprising, even for me. So that is it for our May 2020 edition of Farsight Human News, the news before it happens, brought to you free on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Please also join us next month in June 2020 for another look into the future of Earth humans. Also be sure to look for the new releases on farsightprime.com this month, including the Farsight ET News on May 7th, the May 8th live intelligence briefing with myself, the major new mysteries release on May 15th, the origin of the coronavirus pandemic, and the Farsight economic forecast focusing on oil prices for the next 2 months. I am Courtney Brown, director of the Farsight Institute. Stay ahead of the curve. Let the mainstream fade in the dust. Be there now.